Hi, my name is Kevin Mack, and I'm presenting at M3 on Friday, August 5th, and I'm talking about style guides. This week I'm creating some videos of content that just really didn't fit into the presentation, so I'm speaking on the design track and kind of keeping my talk more on the design crafting side and how the process works. So between yesterday through the end of this week, I'm going to be putting out little things that hopefully are helpful for people when they're thinking about style guides and working as a designer or a developer, and just helping you have additional insight on crafting a style guide. So today I was thinking that I would talk about imagery for the web. So media assets and the treatment for them are really important and kind of vital for a successful style guide. Some of you may be familiar with, say, an intrinsic ratio, if I could spell. So what an intrinsic ratio is, a traditional element. So if I just go like this for right now and say that I make this guy width 400 pixels and a height of 300 pixels, oops, and if I give it a background color of red, this guy is 4 by 3. One of the things you'll notice is it doesn't scale down. So unlike an image, if I have an image and I say hold it 400 by 300, so if I have this image, it doesn't scale on its own, but if I add a class, say something like full, say width is 100%, and I apply this to this image is going to scale at a 4 by 3 ratio. Now elements don't do that on their own, but you can easily get that same effect, and I'll quickly show you how. So it changes from a component, say it's an object. So the O stands for object, and here we have intrinsic. The first thing to do is you remove the height from it. So the height is now 0, so that guy is gone. All we see is this image that's right here. And what I can do is I can say O intrinsic, and I'm going to create something that's 4 by 3. And how I can do that, writing some sass or just knowing the math of it. I'm really struggling to type today. So I can use sass and say percentage 3 divided by 4, or I can just say 75%. So now if I apply the selector to this guy, you will now see that this div is scaling up the same way. And where this gets really cool is you can apply a background image to this guy and it will scale at the same rate, or I could drop in an image that is inside here, or an element, and it will also keep the same ratio. So say this was maybe 200 by 150. I could have something like this. Position absolute. I could say width is 100% and height is 100%. And I just have to make this guy be a position relative, and it will stay in there. So there's a lot of tips or tricks you can do with that, but when it comes to images on the web, especially in the style guide, you want to create kind of a library of all the different use cases. So having intrinsic ratios in there are really helpful. You can use it for video components too, so I could apply this same intrinsic element treatment to an embedded YouTube video and it'll scale up and down, which is really nice. But one of the big things to do when thinking about images is the different cases of where they can come in. So something like the media object. It's a 50 by 50 image, and then I have, oops, media name, paragraph tag, and alright, so another thing to do here is add this guy. And I'll explain what all this is in a second here. I just want to kind of cue this up. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I want this to be off to the left and the image to also be to the left of it and not flow afterwards. So what I can do is, there are a couple ways of approaching this. This. And this is one of the most common object-oriented patterns out there. And because I have a float, I have to clear it. I have to add a content here. Display table. So now why this pattern is really nice is this is one of the most commonly used design patterns for the web out there, is that the image is off to the left here and the content is off to the right. Actually put this backwards. So no matter what, the content on the right scales and the image stays over here. But why this pattern is so nice is if I change this image to 150 by 150, I have a whole brand new pattern here. Also, some other things that people like to do when using the media object is to add spacing in there, so something like this. 20 pixels. So now it has that consistent gutter there. So that image isn't scaling, but this guy is. So when thinking about images and different patterns, say you had product listings or something like that where the image was off to the left and the content was off to the right, there's probably only like 3 or 4 different sizes that you want on your site. A small, medium, a large, and then maybe some variant one that can come up, like a thumbnail one. And you want to create this consistent. So whether that image is 50 pixels or 150 or 100, you want to kind of document it and put the use cases out there. Now, one of the other more complex ways of thinking about imagery for the web is a methodology that my friend Tim Bondolo and I created. It's called Asset Template Guides. So we did a presentation for the Columbus Web Group last year, and kind of it's an hour-long presentation, and it goes kind of fully in depth of what Asset Template Guides are. But I think it's really important when thinking about imagery for the web, and Asset Template Guides kind of are an extension of things like the media object, but it really focuses on the creative side of creating assets and doing production design inside of a responsive landscape. So quickly kind of going over what an asset template guide is. We also abbreviate it to ATG, but it's crafting assets for the digital landscape, and it's inspired by traditional print. It's really aiming to solve 4 problems. And the first problem of it is the reflow of content in that responsive landscape. So before responsive, we created a lot of crazy sites and did a lot of layering effect. And when responsive came around, we started seeing websites that looked very gritty and was very layout centric and it was very restrictive on the design side. So those are some of the additional points here, but the creative freedom when designing in responsive, and when I show you a demo, you'll kind of see it come together, but it's to create a seamless design no matter what the landscape or size dimension is. Really empower both designers and developers to collaborate with each other, so improve the communication between the 2 sides of the spectrum while working in parallel. And what it really helps is when, say you're working with an agency or a team and you've created a template that is really solid, you can hand out the asset template guide, and it becomes documentation for the future production team or designers to use. And again, so when thinking about imagery, we get really caught up in the production and the assets, and asset template guides as well as things like the media object help us think in more of a structural format and how the content will be laid together. So asset template guides are inspired by print design. I, at one point in my career, did a lot of print design, and even as soon as like the last month or two, I designed an album cover for my friend Mary Lynn, and still have to use kind of print design and help out people with their different album covers. So it comes up in my life all the time, and that's when Tim and I were working on a lot of responsive projects and creating style guides. It all kind of came together and clicked. So we've been working on this probably for the past 4 years and use it on our big marketing sites. So by traditional print, there's really these 5 pieces. There's the bleed, the trim line, the safety, the crop, and the fold. They're shown here in the graphic, so they are actually lines and indications of how a designer can work and kind of work around the restrictions of the product and the physical item that's going to be printed on, and give them insight of how it's going to show up when that final product is done, similar to how the web works. So bleed is that first one where printing goes beyond the edge. So this is typically where if you're doing print design or product design, you want to create your design so it can go completely off and it looks completely seamless. The trim line is where it's actually getting cut, so where the product line is going. So the bleed goes outside the trim line. This is just where a lot of the manufacturing happens, and sometimes there's air between trim line and bleed, so you want to give more room that goes outside of that cutting zone. The safety is where it's going to be visible, and it's the most necessary content of your design, and you kind of want to focus your main design inside here and kind of extend it to that trim line and that bleed. The crop is the outside of the product, and then the fold are really indications of additional pieces that may happen inside of a package. So in a CD case, it may be where the folding happens, or the increase happens, or where the CD is actually laid inside of the design. So what we did was we took these 5 things and translated them over to the web. So here you see a graphic, a browser, and I'll walk you through how these kind of align and then end with a quick little demo. This is part of our portfolio design, redesign that we're doing for Cardinal Solutions too. So again, bleed, trim line, safety, crop, and fold come into play, but they have different meanings but still work kind of the same way. So bleed is the first one. It's the part of the image, and this is more of accent pieces of your design, and these are pieces that may not be as important. So as I get into the next one, which is trim line, these are the viewable area inside the browser. So the part of the image that is seen within the viewport, parts of the bleed at certain size dimensions may be getting cut off because it may be going off screen. And you'll see that in the demo, but it's really focusing on the viewport of the image. The safety is the main part. It's the one part of the image that will always be visible across small screens as well as large screens. The crop is the physical dimension of the image, so it's the size of the image, the 400 by 300 image, so it's the image size itself. And then where we've kind of extended this is the fold is content, so how content is going to be layering on top of an image. At Cardinal and a lot of the projects that we work on, we do what's referred to as a stress test. So we take a component and we drop in as much content as possible and we try to break it. If we identify if the content is breaking the design, we'll make some variation or modification to the structure or the layout to make sure it fulfills the need. If we identify that the content, say it has is averaging 70 characters, but in the database there's something that goes up to 80 characters, we want to make sure that fulfills the needs of the 80 characters. But then if we find out that we created a design that was for 70 characters, but the average is 80, we're going to want to update our design to fulfill the needs of the average design. So that's kind of how it translates over. And this process is also going to show you a demo of it. And I'll kind of cover all those different pieces and parts in this process. So typically it starts with kind of a concept that we have. Here's a layout that Tim put together, and we kind of whiteboarded or drew up on it about what's important of this image and how things can be laid, and how it would translate over to an asset template guide. So from here we take that and we create it as code. So this is kind of a screen grab or video of my browser showing the asset template guide. So around that, the pink is the viewport of the browser that I was recording. The yellow is the outside of the image, so it's the full image aspect ratio. The gray over on the left hand side as well as the top is where content's laying on top of it, so that's the fold. The green inside here, that solid green, is the safety. The blue is the bleed, and that's going to be the part that gets cut off. Now there's two different things that I didn't talk about here, and this is something that we evolved over time. The solid green means that it's available at larger viewports, so traditionally a desktop, and the thin line is more on mobile. So here, when you're looking in the middle of the green block, that's from that L and a little bit extended out from that exclamation mark, is going to be available on mobile, and then that green line is from this blue line off to the left. That green line is going to be I'm sorry, that first part is going to be available on the desktop, but that thinner green line to the other green line is going to be available on mobile. So anytime where you see the thick green inside the other green line means that it's always going to be available everywhere. So the thin lines just mean mobile, and the thick solid line mean desktop. So what this does is I can predict what's going to happen. So if I play this video here, you can see that the viewport's getting smaller. The blue on the right is overflowing off. That is not as important to the image, so it kind of can bleed out and kind of be cut off. The rest of it starts scaling down once it gets to another size. And then this is what it would look like on a smaller screen or a mobile. So the idea here is that a designer can take this asset template guide, work inside their favorite design program, whether that be Sketch or Photoshop, and have a pure understanding of how this image or asset is going to translate to the web and relating it to different content types and how they're going to be layering on top of it. So after we have kind of that first step, we typically play with a photo in here. So here's taking that photo and we kind of move it around, bounce it. This is where we're not really at the complete refining of the image itself, but we're working with a real image to make sure that's aligning, dropping in the browser, and making sure that's working. So here you can see that that wallet gets cut off, and then as it gets smaller, it scales down, and then it eventually pops down to the bottom. Now kind of showing you a final product. This is where the team kind of refines everything. So here we have a gradient background, some layering of some speckles in the background. So there's a gradient, there's a blue color, there's a gradient, and then an image. And using that asset template guide at really whatever screen size that you look at this, it looks like it was designed for it. So that's really the goal of the asset template guides, and really thinking about imagery for the web is you shouldn't just be plopping in images just to plop them in there, and at whatever size that the user is opening up their browser, it should look like it's designed. So including things like this inside a style guide are incredibly helpful for the communication between designers, developers, as well as for creating really quality products that are going to fulfill the needs of different users in different contexts. And kind of a super broken record when I say this, but it's really this idea of letting experts lead the craft and everyone collaborating as a team. So as I said, there's a lot more to cover. I'll be covering a lot on Friday, but I hope this was helpful, and brings you insight in how you think about media as well as imagery for a style guide. I know this was kind of quick and kind of high level, but I hope you found it helpful. Thank you.